Now, I think, it's very interesting. I think that it's hugely important, especially for those people who seem to come from different backgrounds, who get entrapped or indoctrinated or poorly taught. There is a reason. The record of Jesus' ministry. Can you imagine living in the flesh for 30 years, all for 3 years of ministry on earth? And the things that are, we don't have everything chronicled. There's no way that you could possibly chronicle every single dimension of Christ's life as the eyewitnesses who were there, the ones that are the gospel writers. So it's interesting to me that some of the things that are chronicled become an important concept for us as we begin to put together and piece together and work out our faith. When it speaks of Jesus, for example, being baptized, many people have debated, well, why did he have to be baptized? Why did he ask John, well, suffer it now and do this thing? That was his identification, his, if you will, public identifying with the sin of mankind. Not that he had any, he had no sin. There is that which was required. And it's interesting how God uses even the things that later on get abused. The symbol that all the writers chronicle in some dimension, like as a dove descending on him, when it speaks of the Spirit of God. And it's interesting that God uses that which in type for the Old Testament mind of understanding was the lowest in terms of offering as a sacrifice that could be made, the lowest value, if you will. And it is this visual perception that is captured by the eyes of those who saw or likened it to. In other words, God uses these tools that are on the level that we can relate to, that we can begin to understand. And that one act was his identification with the very concept of fallen man, if you will. And thereafter that, I think I taught on this once before, that we have his being baptized, and then after that we've got the testing, the temptation of the devil. A lot of people don't see or understand these concepts as applicable to themselves. That the minute you identify with Christ, that is, he's chosen you, that prevenient grace working in you, the eyes are illuminated, you begin to say, yeah, I'm listening, I'm reading, I want to follow along. The same path and experience that is given in pattern of Christ being baptized, that concept. Did he have the Spirit before that moment? Of course he did. This is what people have grappled with. Well, was it this or was it that? There's a concept being painted for us that's very clear. Identification with sinning man, being identified as the one who would take away the sins of the world. Then you've got his temptation. Satan tempts him. And we fail to see sometimes these are the same patterns that we will encounter as we are chosen, as we become illuminated, as the Spirit begins to open up our understanding and conviction begins to come. We will also be tempted. Now, we may not be tempted as boldly as Christ was, but we will be tempted. All of these are given as patterns of understanding of why, at a later time, those that he called, those that he chose, his disciples, he says, now I'm going away, but I'm going to send another one alongside to, and he basically spells out exactly what that ministry of the third person of the Trinity is. And it's very clear to me. It isn't for display purposes, as some would have you believe, the demonstration of their spirituality, but rather in John 16 and verse 5, but now I go I go my way to him that sent me. None of you asketh me, Whither goest thou? Then he says, it's expedient for you that I go away, for if I go not away, the Comforter will not come unto you. But if I depart, I will send him unto you. And when he is come, he will reprove the world of sin, and of righteousness, and of judgment. Of sin, because they believe not on me. We're not talking about sin as because he says it, because they believe not on me. They do not believe who I am. Of righteousness, because I go to my Father, and you see me no more. Of judgment, because the prince of this world is judged. Then he says something very staggering. I have many things to say unto you, but you can't bear them now. Howbeit, when he, the person, the third person of the Trinity, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you in all truth. For he shall not speak of himself, but whatsoever he shall hear, that shall he speak, and he will show you things to come. He shall glorify me. When people talk about some other type of ministry, there is no such thing. For he shall receive of mine and show it unto you. Now, it's very simple for me. When I read this, I think to myself, very plainly, the things that they couldn't understand at the time while he was talking, that weren't clear, would be made clear. And they became abundantly clear after that the Spirit was poured out on the day of Pentecost, when the day of Pentecost began to be fulfilled, the beginning of the harvest of the souls of men. So I say this with a strong concern that we should be very much focused on understanding God has given a very clear roadmap. Now, there's many things that we do. Technology, I'm sure. Was technology a thought when the writing of forget about the New Testament, when the writing of the Old Testament, was technology even a thought that we would be contending with TVs and monitors and computers? But that shouldn't change the motive for the delivery of what is the Word of God. So this subject was kind of heavy on me, and I think attaching it to the concept of giving is extremely important, because those who have the Spirit of Christ, you know what I'm saying of the offense that it creates inside you. It is offensive to see the abuses go on, and yet you have to be of a sure mind to say that these people who willfully succumb to that, they certainly can't be operating in the Spirit, because the Spirit would give them the eyes of discernment to say, this is not of Christ. This is not of God. Now, I know there'll be some today that will hear and say, wow, that's a pretty hard message. Who can hear that? I'm not wanting every single person to hear. I'd rather have a few hundred people that are really wanting to follow hard after God than thousands upon thousands, and many of which sit there bored and idle and looking at me, and I become responsible for that idleness. No, thank you. That's how much I take what I do seriously. So I'm just telling you right now, this is a subject that's been very, very dominant for the better part of 35 years, and it will remain so. Because as long as the truth is being heralded, as long as people are being instructed, there may not be an absolute clear-cut, this is the cookie-cutter fashion in which it's done, but I've given you at least the scriptures that say, this is what God promised to us, to his church. He promised to not leave us orphans. He didn't leave us to our own devices. He didn't say, hey, listen, I gave you enough. You figure it out for yourselves. There's more than enough here to say it's pretty clear. Now, those people that begin to add, that's their problem. I'm interested in those people who are interested in receiving the Word of God, sola scriptura, as one famous person in history said. Now, I'm taking your commitments, your reservations, and I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of people that will respond, not because I say, oh, we have a need or you got to do this, but rather because you understand the Spirit of Christ that is acting in you, moving in you, in your being, that you will bear much fruit to your account in the heavenlies. Now that's a pretty, for some maybe seems far away, but if you have the breath of eternity on you, it is not. Get on the telephone.
his house. Magnify the Lord. Lift up holy hands. Our hearts in one accord.